Today's theme is all about knowing what you want. I just started going to therapy. This is like, I hadn't gone in like maybe 10 years. It's preventative. I have too much going on. I just need someone to like tell everything to. And I was like complaining about my friends to my therapist. And I was like, oh, I just wish they could do things with me. I have all these introverted friends and I know they need downtime, blah, blah, blah. I want to try to accommodate them. And my therapist was like, well, what do you like to do? And I said, oh, I love going to restaurants. I love trying new things and trying new foods. And she said, so why don't you just ask your friends to go with you to restaurants? And I was like, oh my gosh. I feel so stupid. Yeah, I feel so dumb because but it was just about like connecting that quick little dot for me. Like, well, what do you want? And then just ask for it. I wonder if you guys ever lose sight of what you want.
So as a mother of two, right, when I'm not intentional, I lose sight of what I want personally, whether it's my own time, whether it's my health.
I lose sight of what I want to do with my time sometimes. And maybe that's more of like losing a bit of focus when everything feels important. It's really hard when you feel like you need to do everything at the same time. And then I have to check in with myself and be like, okay, what do you really want, Courtney? What are you spending time on and why? And then sometimes I just take a step back and I just say, oh, I actually don't need to do this. That's not actually what I want to be doing.
Well, for me, I think it happens to all of us. The struggle resonates with me. What I do is to kind of reground myself in how do I really define success? And that guides everything. Because sometimes you have a lot of demand from your work, for example, and that becomes the whole definition of success. Or there's a lot going on at home as a parent, as a spouse, or even as a daughter many times. I feel more and more as a daughter, there is a demand. And then when I feel that way, I kind of take a step back and I think to myself, let's define success. Let's know what is it that I'm trying to get to. And that will help me prioritize and ground myself some. Well, hi everyone. My name is Paula Ramos. I'm Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at Kimberly-Clark Corporation. I do wear a lot of hats because in addition to being an executive, I would even say before being an executive, I am a mother of two. So I have two daughters, 15 and 12. I've been married for 23 years. I come from Brazil. I was born and raised in Brazil in a city called Belo Horizonte. And I have a huge family. So I play the role of granddaughter, daughter, cousin, you name it. I'm there. So there are many, many hats. And there is the Paula hat. One of the learnings over the years for me is that you can only give if you're not depleted. So in these days, different from what I did in the beginning of my career, I would say, I am very mindful of reserving some Paula time to recharge myself so that I can be better at all the hats that I just mentioned to you guys.
If we were in a group setting, I would probably say, everyone raise your hand if you need a little bit more you time. And I bet you we'd see a lot of hands raised.
I know. It's like both hands.
Sure, we all do. But it's that thing, right? The things you don't schedule time for doesn't get done. So I'm very mindful. I practice Pilates religiously every day, 5 times a week, sometimes 6, for an hour. Because that is the time that I kind of recharge. Of course, I do other things as well, but there's got to be a real problem if I skip that routine more than a day and I feel it. So I know how important it is for me. Sometimes it feels a little selfish, but it's a small investment of time, but a big thing that I do for myself.
What difference do you feel?
I feel more tired, believe it or not. I feel less focused mentally. And I feel that there's something missing from my routine. And it's one of the things that ground me. So I'm really mindful of keeping it.
I also love Pilates, so I had to ask.
You've been on a long journey now too, Courtney.
Yeah.
I know, it's been almost a year and a half.
Yeah. For me, it's been 5 years. I checked the other day. I think
That's
I had
amazing.
840 classes done.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, that's
Wow.
awesome. That's Courtney's language.
Yeah.
It is. It is. I'm hitting
great.
200 soon, so I'm like, we'll bond.
Keep up.
Amazing. So, Paula, what is one rule you have broken in your career that you feel has gotten you where you are today?
I think the main rule that I've broken was how I looked at my career. I feel no matter where you are in the world, and perhaps it's just the Western world, but I feel it's the same in Brazil or in the US. It's this impression that you look at your career as this speedboat and you get on that boat and you go as fast as you can in as linear a trajectory as you can to just get to the other side. So it's all about how fast you get to the other side. I never liked really that rule. I always felt that curiosity is really one of the defining characteristics for me. It's something that really fuels me. Don't get me wrong, I wanted to be on the water, to be in the arena and advance, but for me, it was less of a speedboat and more of a sailboat, because a sailboat allows me to go explore different paths. A sailboat puts the control more on me on how fast I'm going to go. And I think that has been a rule that I've broken, that of course, when you look today, more than 20 years later from when I first started after college, people say, oh, but you went pretty fast. But I took some really important detours, be it motherhood pretty early in my career, be it the type of clients that I served while I was at McKinsey, and even moving to the US 8 years ago as a young partner at McKinsey. And then the last one has been joining Kimberly-Clark as an executive as well. So I know where I want to get to, but I also know that the go as fast as you can on a very straight line is not the path for me, because I don't think that's interesting enough. It doesn't make room for my curiosity and my learning, which is something that really drives me.
What are those things that, as you're going on that sailboat, keeping the same analogy, that you look for, that you enjoy, that keeps you kind of going? You're still advancing, but you're enjoying it.
I would say the first thing, Marari, would be if I put the lens of my professional roles as the primary lens, it needs to be, I always say, more than a job, but less than a life. As far as we know, we have this one precious life. And of course, work is very fulfilling. It's very important, but it's not the only thing. And family life, but like real family life, is something I really care about because of the way I was brought up. I'm Brazilian. It's something very important to me. The other thing I would say is learning. Like, is it something that inspires me, not only intellectually, but something like in my gut that I say, this is something I want to experience. This is something I want to learn about. And it's actually one of the drivers that brought me to Kimberly-Clark, because I looked at the mission. If you think about better care for a better world, it's very simple. But I always believed, or one of my drivers is that you have to leave the world a better place because you walked on it. And this is what the company is all about, and what the mission is all about. So I kind of fell in love with it. But there are many other examples, like even my move to the US recently. And I went to college in Canada, then came back for grad school, spent a couple of years in New York. Before that, I had a very successful career in Brazil. I was living a great life. But when I looked at what else, I wasn't even 40 then, what else could come? What are the opportunities I want to offer to my two daughters? And all of that went against the grain of you conquer, and then you enjoy. And for me is you constantly learn and you push yourself. And in the process, you enjoy. You don't enjoy it only when you get there, but you enjoy the whole process.
One of the things that I noticed from looking at you on LinkedIn is you worked for one other company before Kimberly-Clark, 18 years. And that's unheard of these days. And you kind of started touching on what prompted you to make the shift. But can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Sure. I would say, even though I did work for McKinsey for 18 years, if I were to break it down, I had so many roles within McKinsey, formal and informal. So formally, of course, you go from analyst to associate to manager and so on. So that changes. I've had a lot of variety that was driven by passions, but I've done telecom, I've done a lot of consumer, I've done healthcare. And then I've done many geographies because I've lived in Brazil and the US, but I did a lot of emerging markets work. So a lot of things in Asia, some in Africa. So there's been a lot of variety. So that's more on the formal roles that I've had at McKinsey. But then informally, I was a partner, but I was also the leader of all the women's initiative that we had at McKinsey All In. And that always gave me a lot of energy. And I think I always seek that variety because I get a lot from being with a lot of different people of different backgrounds and different tenures and so on. So it's been one company, but it's been extremely varied. Even when people told me, don't spend time on diversity anymore, you should be evolving, I'm like, yeah, but I love it, so I will. So I've always been a little rebellious about forging my path, and so far it's worked.
I think it's really cool that you said you still experienced variety, because I think that is a fear that a lot of people in their early and mid careers fear is, oh my gosh, I don't want to stay at a long time because I won't, I'll be missing that variety. If someone's listening to this and they're mid career and they're worried about variety, or what does that even look like? Can you just tell us, what did the variety look like for you at like 3 different stages while you were there? So maybe when you first started, in the middle, and then towards the end.
Well, I like to think that I'm still mid-career, but let's
Love it.
I want to do many things still. I think in the beginning, it's natural that when you get started, you have to ride the learning curve and you should focus time on that. But you can still have variety in terms of, the relationships you build within the work. So you don't have to all be only with the people you work more directly. You can be that person, that glue that connects other people in more social settings and so on. Then mid-career, I think the biggest source of variety for me was motherhood, because between McKinsey and being a mom and, of course, being a wife, there wasn't a ton, but it was a ton of time left. But even within motherhood, how do you think through relationships and friendship that you want to build within that? Because I also believe that you shouldn't go into any role by yourself, right? You're always looking for peers. You're always looking for that village. When you're further out, I think that's when you have the most latitude to really have that. So for work, you can think about your role as an executive, but you can start being an angel investor or being in boards. It can be public boards or non-public boards. And you can start thinking about that. And that gives you variety, as well as the luxury of giving back. That can be giving back your time, which I think is the most valuable one. Being a woman of color, and in Brazil, it was only a woman because everyone was more or less high collar. Yeah. But then when I came here, they're like, Paula, as a woman of color. I'm like, what color? Be part of those groups, because you can be the most senior person in the group and still you get a ton back. So I think it's all about connections and things that that really have meaning for you and give you energy. It's how I seek variety.
Yeah, variety really is the spice of life, as they say. And it seems like being in one place has given you the freedom to explore. And like coming back to your speedboat analogy, it's not about the speed or even maybe the goal at some point. It's about getting curious along the way. And it's interesting that at the beginning of this conversation, you talked about how like Western society is a speedboat. I mean, it is. Whether you make it one or not, it is. And Courtney and I have been talking about this a lot because, she is like, well, shouldn't I be here right now? Like, shouldn't I be like, am I too late? And it sounds like if any of us get stuck in that like time trap, I really love this idea of thinking, well, like, where do you want to sail to next? And like, how about we just explore? Let's get curious. Let's see what's out there in this wonderful sea of life.
Well, I, of course, agree. But to the point of the comparisons, which I think is a trap, like, shouldn't I be here by now? My question is always, says who? Because no one else has a life exactly with the choices that I've made and with the priorities that I have. So it's really hard to compare. And in this day and age, like, says who? I need to be where by when?
Write
No,
that
I'm
down,
only
Courtney.
accountable to myself. And,
Already going.
I feel like the economy is just so varied. We make such different choices that it's like once you're out of college, you're out of the rat race because no one else will have made life's choices that are comparable to yours. And therefore, it's just very hard. It's a trap. I think it's a trap we need to get out of as soon as we can. It's a very tempting trap for sure, but I think it's a choice. You choose not to do that to yourself, and that's very liberating.
And that's
Listening
great.
to
Go ahead.
both of you share this perspective, I've been thinking about it, and now I'm going to say it because it's the third time it's come up in my head, is a quote from years ago that I read, and it was, "Find peace in the pace of your growth." And like this sailboat, like when you think of being on a sailboat, it's very relaxing. Elisa, when you just did this with your hand and you were going side to side, and even the tone of your voice, I was like, yeah, there can be peace in the journey. We can flow through it a bit. I mean, I know it's easier said than done, but that's what I'm hearing from this is like, it doesn't have to look the same, and find peace in knowing that my priorities are different from the next person and the person after that. So it's like, what are we even worrying about, right? Paula, you said that originally you wanted to make a shift or a switch from being a knower to a learner. And that also prompted you to move on from Mackenzie. So I'm very curious, would you advise other women to make that switch too if they've been a knower for a long time?
So the answer is yes. I think making space to be more of a learner is always a great thing. But when you feel you mastered something, and it's a personal preference, but for me specifically, this idea of going into something that I'm not sure I will be good at, it's very appealing. Some people like to be really specialized and they love to be knowers. It doesn't mean that they don't learn within their area of expertise. I personally like to balance both. You can be a knower and a learner. And I think Kimberly-Clark specifically, when the invitation came, it was very clear to me in my conversations with my future boss that he also valued people who could be both knowers and learners. So that's important. But Courtney, I would like to go back to the sailboat a bit, because I want to say the sailboat's ambitious. The sailboat can go really fast. The sailboat can be much harder to navigate. It requires a lot more skill than a speedboat. So it's relaxing sometimes, but it's not the point of it. The point of it, it's not one being stressful and one being relaxing, because I
Yeah.
don't believe in that. The point is, how do you craft the journey? And are you looking at it as a straight line, or are you giving yourself latitude to explore different things? Because if you've ever done boating, and actually driving a speedboat is much easier than driving a sailboat.
I learned this recently, actually. A friend of mine who was a Boy Scout or an Eagle Scout was telling me that it's so hard to actually sail a sailboat. And a lot of people don't know that. I didn't know that. When they told me this, I was like, there's no way. And they actually said exactly what you did. They said it's a lot harder to steer a sailboat than if you were to just drive a speedboat. We were on a speedboat at the time. And it just, that image always stuck with me. And now I have a new association with it based on what you shared.
One of the things that we strive on is equipping leaders who want to advance multicultural women. And you started touching on this a little bit, and I love that this is something that you're passionate about it as you were speaking it early. My question to you is, what advice would you give a leader, a person in the C-suite, or anybody in a position of power on how they can intentionally advance the incredible talent of multicultural women around them?
Well, it's really about two things. It's about mentorship, but more importantly, it's about sponsorship. It's about being that person who will open the door and use some of their capital, their personal capital, to build an opportunity and give that to you. So that's what it takes, really. Because the mentor will talk to you about it. The sponsor will actually do something about it. So if you're serious about it, be a sponsor. Build that opportunity and put people of color in a position where they can push themselves and they can deliver and know that you got their back. That's what it is all about. The other thing that you can do if you are a person of color, which is something that I didn't realize for the longest time, is to be that visible example, because it's hard for people to aspire to something that they haven't seen yet. So if you are there, don't be shy about talking about your own journey. What was hard? What did you lean into? And so perhaps those would be the three things that I advise people who see that as part of their mission and legacy to do. It's mentoring, sponsorship, and really being an example to others.
I mean, that's why you're here today on this podcast, because we want to give women like you more visibility, because we know the women that listen to this want to see the variety in leaders that can exist in the workplace. And what happens when we bring more multicultural women into positions of power? Well, you are an example, and you think differently, and you've lived your life different than the norm. You've broken the rules that you're hearing from different places, and you've made your own rules. I love what you said about, there's ease and then there's doing the work. And it doesn't mean your way isn't the easy way out. It's actually more strategic. And it's more strategic because you do know what you want. You said you value your family, you value yourself, and that's pretty big right there. That's like going against the rules. And it's just so cool to be able to see a real life person with real life examples for all of us and for the women listening to this podcast. And I'm curious, is there anything else that you think is important for women who might not see people like you at the top very often?
I'd like them to know that they probably judge themselves a lot more than the world judges them. And while it's good to be very self-aware, it's also good to stick to the facts. So if people tell you that you're doing well and that you have what it takes, believe them. Trust them.
If someone tells you you can, believe them.
That was great.
Want more advice on how to break the rules and outsmart the game to advance your career? Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and our website, whatrulespodcast.com, for more insight from our guests and host, and join our community on LinkedIn where we discuss rule-breaking strategies for multicultural women. What Rules is a project of Zara Consulting and is supported by the amazing team at Stories Bureau. This episode was produced by Alexandra Uresta with editing and music supervision by Joshua Ramsey and was engineered and mixed by Tim Ballant. Our podcast cover was designed by DeLeon Creative. Visit whatrulespodcast.com for more info, upcoming events, and all episodes of What Rules, including video, and make sure to give us a follow.